Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of. Okay, let's get it done.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for April the 24th, episode number 1470. We've got a great show on tap. In just a few minutes, we will be joined by our good friend from the state, the Go Gamecocks women's basketball beat writer, Payton Titus. She will join us. We'll look back at Dawn Staley's third national championship, and then we'll look ahead to next season. Then we will be joined by the venerable Phil Kornblutt of the Sports Talk Media Network to talk Gamecock football and recruiting. But first, let's jump right into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company, Nana's Porch. Nana's Porch services the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. They should be your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, or now that spring has sprung, it's staying daylight until almost 9 o'clock now. If you want to have a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. If you've got an event where you need to bring in a food trailer, Nana's Porch voted among the top 3 food trailers in the Charlotte area by a local newspaper poll. And as we all know, the award-winning pimento cheese voted number 1 and number 2 by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association in the meat and cheese category. Go and check them out at nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. Tell them Keith Alsep sent you. You'll love it. I guarantee it. And our chat box also sponsored by Nana's Porch. So jump in, leave your questions, comments. We'll get to them in the show. All right, so let's talk a little men's basketball recruiting. Lamont Paris and staff expected to host LaSalle transfer point guard Jameer Brickus beginning today. He's a 5'11", 205-pound true point guard, a native of Philadelphia. You'd have to think Dawn Staley could be involved. What do you say, fams? That's her home territory. Brickus, one of the top guards in the Atlantic 10 when he entered the transfer portal. The first 4 schools to reach out were all A-10 schools. He is a big-time playmaker, very crafty with the ball, an excellent scorer, distributor. He's strong enough to get into the lane, get his shot, but if you converge on him, he can drop it off to a big And I think the Gamecocks are going to have that big category covered. But I love the fit. If South Carolina gets Brickus this past season, he was a warrior. He started all 33 games. He played almost 37 minutes per game, 43.3% from the field, 40% from three, 86% from the free throw line, averaged almost 5 assists per game and averaged 14 points per game. He had basically a 2.5 to 1 turnover to assist ratio. Basically 5 assists for every 2 turnovers, 13.9 points per game. A legit 3-point shooter with Meechie Johnson range, but also a big-time playmaker, crafty. You can tell he's got that Philly mentality. I think the Gamecocks are in great shape here. Gamecocks over the weekend hosted Mount St. Mary's transfer, Dakota LaFew. He's 6'5". He's more of a 2-guard. Really good shooter, but I really think this team, they need a true point guard. Losing Talon Cooper and Meechie Johnson, you really don't have a proven NCAA caliber point guard on the roster. So, hey, my man, Chris Payne from Nana's Porch in the house. The tooth is doing good. I'm holding off. The pain, the swelling has gone down. I'll have to give you a call. We'll talk about that. But I got a broken tooth. It's too long of a story to go into. But at any rate, I love what Jameer Brickus could bring to this roster. Gamecocks also hope to host this weekend really what they hope to be the centerpiece of their transfer portal class, and that is South Carolina native and Alabama Final Four starting center Nick Pringle, 6'10", 230 pounds. He had that huge double-double against Clemson in the Elite Eight to get Alabama to the Final Four. He had several double-doubles, which is kind of hard to do on a team that they shoot more threes than anybody. And I think he could be a real force here. You think about it last season. What were the teams that gave South Carolina problems? It was the Auburns. It was even Tennessee because of their bigs, particularly in that second game. You look at Oregon in the NCAA tournament. Even East Carolina, quite frankly, with Azar, their post player. Athletic bigs gave South Carolina a problem primarily because B.J. Mack, his skill set was not equipped to deal with that. I mean, quite frankly, he was excellent. Lamont Paris put him in great positions, but South Carolina had nobody that could guard really athletic bigs. You were asking a true freshman to do it in the notorious CMB. So Nick Pringle, he is that guy. He's an elite athlete. He's a rebounder. He's a rim protector. He's a better scorer than what was indicated at Alabama because they just didn't throw it inside. They were jacking up threes or they were getting it to Nelson and letting him operate. They left it up to Pringle to have to clean up the glass. He's a Windex guy. He would be the crown jewel of this class. He is a South Carolina native. So he will be in this weekend. Yesterday, the Gamecocks officially announced the signing of Jordan Butler, the 7-foot, 230-pound native of Greenville. Both his parents are South Carolina alums. His mom played basketball for the Gamecocks. He was a top 100 recruit at one point, finished in the top 150. And he's a guy that can be a pick and pop. You can put him in that dunker spot on the screen and roll and throw the lobs up. He's not a banger. He's more of a finesse guy, but he can block shots. He can play on the perimeter. He can play on the high post. I think he's an excellent pairing with Pringle or Colin Murray Boyles, and he would be the centerpiece. You've already added Cam Scott, an elite wing scorer, a high school All-American. Now you got Jordan Butler. I think all the signs are pointing towards Jameer Brickus joining the Gamecocks. And then, if you can add Nick Pringle, I think South Carolina most certainly will not be picked last again next season at SEC Media Days. All right, Sidney Fugar, the transfer offensive tackle from Western Illinois, he has entered the transfer portal. Kind of expected he wasn't going to play. I mean, South Carolina's offensive tackle position was in such disarray. We'll talk more about this with Phil. You started Jackson Hughes and Sidney Fugar the first game. Well, not Fugar, but he came in after Casey Henry got injured on the second play. He was always supposed to be a developmental guy, forced into action. You've recruited over him, and so we wish him all the best. All right, let's bring in our first guest today, and that is the award-winning Payton Titus, who's now back healthy. We were going to have her on right after the Final Four, but she kind of had a combination of COVID and the flu. I don't even know what they call that. They call it fluvid?
They call it Flovid.
Flovid.
Yes.
Okay. Flovid. Well, we are certainly glad you're doing better, and it's always great to have you on. And I know the fams are still celebrating 17 days after South Carolina won their third national championship by beating Iowa, the officials, and ABC and ESPN. I kid, but I think all Gamecocks are glad it was not a one-possession game in the final minute. But let's just talk about your time in Cleveland, because it's been a while since we've had you on. Obviously, the weather couldn't have been great because you got sick. Cleveland not known for the balmy late March and early Aprils for sure. But what was it like with all the media attention, more eyes on the women's game than ever before? I mean, records being set, right, from the Elite Eight game between Iowa and LSU. Angel Reese not delivering on her promise at the ESPYs that LSU would win a second national championship. And then that Final Four matchup with UConn, and then the national championship game, just record-setting crowds. What was it like there in Cleveland? It had to be a spectacle, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was awesome. I had such a fun time. Speaking of media coverage and stuff, South Carolina locker room was very crowded. It was crowded the whole tournament just because we have a lot of particularly local TV folks who are traveling with the team and everything like that. So that makes it a little crowded, but then you have that, and then you also have more national folks at the Final Four, kind of obviously. So that was wild. That was not exactly what I was anticipating, but it was really cool to see that many people there and that many people invested. The environment was awesome. I think that was the second NBA arena I've ever been to. The other one was the one in Miami, which I can't remember what it's called now. After all the various
American Airlines.
Yeah, or is that, I don't know. But anyway, I liked the arena. It was nice. And I mean, the crowd was electric. Like, we got to sit, local newspaper media got to sit right behind the Gamecocks bench for games, which was cool. We had trouble seeing a little bit because we were sat like right behind Camilla and Adele, of course. But it was nice to be there and be kind of sandwiched between fans and being able to hear how they were taking in the game, and then also being able to see people on the bench and see their reactions, which was especially fun in like the final minutes of the national championship game, because you could just see them realizing that they had it and celebrating with each other, and being able to get a little bit more sights and sounds than you normally would at a CLA game across the court. So that was fun. I mean, I'm pretty sure the practice that they had in between the Final Four, the open practice they had between the Final Four and the national championship game, was sold out. Like the practice.
Yes, that Saturday practice. That was crazy. I watched some of it. They interviewed Tessa Johnson's parents. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. And we got to see a really fun side of Coach Staley too. She was interviewed by Holly Rowe in like the final minutes of the open period. And the DJ was playing Boys to Men, and Coach Staley took the mic from Holly Rowe and started singing Boys to Men, which was really funny. And just, I felt like that I included that in my follow-in column after the national championship game, because I was just like, this whole season has been so much fun, and we've seen a real transformation in the program and Coach Staley and in the other coaches in learning how to navigate leading this team to an undefeated season and national championship, and just seeing how much fun she was letting herself have and letting herself show us, which was really cool. I, like, surprisingly enough, because I was nervous the whole tournament, just because I was like, this is my first March Madness tournament I've ever covered. But in Cleveland was probably like the least nervous I was the whole tournament. I was just able to actually kind of enjoy where I was and everything. And when they were doing starting lineup announcements, like before the national championship game, I actually was tearing up in my seat, because I was like, wow, it finally just sank in where I am and what I'm experiencing and like the environment that I'm in. And this is really cool. So I had a blast. I have my cup of confetti on the fridge so my cats don't try to eat it before I find like a mason jar or shadow box or whatever to put that in. And I've got my credentials up on my wall, and yeah, it was a really, really fun time. I was sad I didn't get to go to the parade or do a lot on the WNBA draft because I was sick, but I mean, it was worth it. I was glad I caught it after the season was over and I got to experience all those things.
All right, so South Carolina became only the 5th program ever to have a perfect season which culminated in a national championship. UConn's done it 5 times, but only, I think it was Texas, Tennessee, UConn, or somebody I'm leaving out.
Baylor.
Oh, yeah, Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
Mulkey, that's why. Yeah, she had maybe the greatest post player of all time on that team, Brittany Griner. A lot of recruiting violations there. But anyway, but to me, this has to be the most unlikely 38-0 national championship team out of all the teams that have done that, because you lost all 5 starters, 7 players off of that team, including the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft. Several NBA players picked, I think 3 in the first round. Zia Cook, LA, and of course, Aaliyah Boston. I mean, South Carolina was not picked to win the SEC. LSU was after they kind of backed into a national championship. But just talk about this team's place in history, because I mean, it didn't take long for them to exert their dominance, and they just never relinquished all season long.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it as local media all year, and then that definitely became a big story nationally once the team got as far as they did. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, to be interacting with the team and the coaches and stuff all year long, and to be hearing them talk in November about how they didn't expect to come out and play Notre Dame the way that they did based on where they were in the summertime, and knowing that there were going to be some growing pains with like very talented players, highly touted players who just, didn't have the experience that the freshies had. And I had a conversation with Coach Staley in like December where she was talking about, how the coaches kind of put themselves in the position to inherit a team like this year with the freshies, just because they were able to get all those women in that class. And, by their own kind of personalities and their own sense of responsibility and care for each other in the program, they decided to stay the whole time and accomplish what they did together. And so that's something that probably will never happen again in college period, right? With the age of the transfer portal and NIL and all these other things that are changing the landscape. So, they had this very rare, very cool circumstance. And so they knew they would be in a situation like this year where things, I guess in the preseason they thought might not go so like compared to their normal standard, because I mean, I think people forget that, this team was still picked preseason top 10 in the AP, and yeah, they weren't picked to win the SEC, but they were picked to finish second behind the reigning national champions. And so you can't really like take a national championship team and not predict them to win the conference or whatever the next year. I think that would be a little bit shady probably. But so I don't think people thought that they would be bad, but they definitely didn't think they were going to be as good as they were. And so I understand the players talking about receipts and things like that when the season ended the way that it did. But, it's just a testament to how talented and how hardworking this team is, and how flexible the coaching staff is, and how they've been able to sustain success as the landscape has been changing, as their roster has been changing, as the typical college athlete is changing. Coach Staley talked about, I want to say after like winter break, so beginning of the conference schedule, about how, these student athletes have a lot going on in their lives, right? And how sometimes there were times where she wanted to get them to focus more on basketball, but they wanted to have these well-rounded lives where, they're focusing on school as they have to, basketball as they have to, but also NIL, and also like having a social life and enjoying themselves and while they're here in this period of time in their lives. And so I'm sure that's a challenge for the players to navigate, a challenge for the coaching staff to navigate, but I think they were just like destined to be this good, because there were times where we would talk to Coach Staley and talk to the players and stuff, and they didn't think they would pull a game out. Like that Tennessee game at Tennessee, Coach Staley said she thought they were going to lose that game, and the fact that she verbalized that to us, I thought was significant. And then obviously the Tennessee game in the SEC championship, some of the players who were on the bench when Camilla had that miraculous 3-point shot, thought that they were going to lose that game, and that was going to be, the one. But it wasn't. And it was hard to kind of quantify or qualify how they were able to pull those kinds of games out. And I think as we started getting toward the end of the season, Coach Staley talked about how, they created good habits and they would just fall back on their habits in those moments. But I also think that there's just kind of some special like spark with this group, and the way that they care about each other, the chemistry that they have with each other, and just their sheer, like talent and willpower that kind of got them to this point, to where they were able to accomplish all the things they were able to accomplish, which is fun to watch and pretty mesmerizing as, consumers and fans of basketball who can't really put ourselves in the shoes of these players of being so elite at what they're elite at, and understand what's going on in their minds. they're just able to somehow do these crazy feats. And, we're kind of in awe of that. So, yeah, I mean, as far as a place in history, I mean, this is such a miraculous season and such a talented team. And it is sad that nationally they didn't get that shine all year long, but it's also unfortunate that they happen to have this shine during a time where you have a generational talent like Caitlin Clark at the end of her collegiate career. And Coach Staley talked about the ways that she's elevated the game and brought eyeballs to the game and respect to the game. And so that was cool too. It was just neat to experience this season with this team and be able to document their story and what made, the different personalities and people kind of click. And then also being able to see it culminate in this perfect, as Raven said, kind of revenge story where you also get to see them face off with a generational talent who I tried to buy tickets the other day to, I'm going to be in DC next month to a Mystics Fever game, and the bots were buying tickets out from underneath me. So maybe I'll be able to see Aaliyah and Caitlin play at some point this summer. Maybe I won't, but it's exciting that people are so excited about all of it. So
I think you probably know somebody, if you reached out, could probably hook you up with that. All right, so to me, the beauty of this team was they could win all kind of different ways. Yes, they blew out Notre Dame, they blew out Maryland, but then we saw them in hostile environments struggle to win. Like the first time they played North Carolina on the road in Chapel Hill, I thought, they kind of let UNC dictate a slower tempo. We saw South Carolina pressure them the second time early and often. The Duke game at LSU, South Carolina pretty much trailed the entire game until the fourth quarter. The Tennessee game on the road, that was a struggle. Then the tournament. It seems like every team that has that perfect season, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. South Carolina squandered a huge lead in the Tennessee game, as they would in the Indiana game. But they were able to get the miraculous shot. And then the LSU game for the SEC tournament championship. I mean, well, you kind of cover Cardoso because you're elbowing her in the neck and the mouth and pulling her hair. You're shutting down Pow Pow. Other players are in foul trouble. Breezy's not hitting, but Malaysia Fulwiley just takes over the game. So, I mean, to me, they were ready for those big moments because of everything they went through up until that point. I thought the NC State game was really the pressure game, and it was only pressure for about 11 minutes because in the second quarter. And so I want to talk about two recruiting classes. We'll talk about this first one, which was Dawn Staley's second number one recruiting class. In that class was Raven Johnson, who was the Naismith National High School Player of the Year because A.Z. Fudd was injured. Sanaya Rivers, who left after winning the national championship as a freshman. Sanaya Fagan, Breezy Hall, and then in the transfer portal, South Carolina added Camila Cardoso. All of those players on display in the national semifinal against NC State. And I thought South Carolina was absolutely dominant and just imposed their will after that first quarter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that game was the beginning stressful, the rest of it not so much. And I think the team talked about like halftime halftime messaging and
yeah, it was actually the third quarter where they blew them out 29-6.
Yeah. And behind that was Camilla just going off. And luckily she was not injured too much to the point where she wasn't able to come back in that game, because that was a scary moment as well. Seeing her come off the court in tears a little bit, which I think was probably mostly just her being kind of scared about, I hope I didn't really injure myself and can't play for the rest of the weekend. But yeah, going into that game, obviously a big storyline was Sanaya Rivers' quote unquote revenge game, but not, because there's no animosity between her and the program or anything. And, talking to the players that she played with at South Carolina, they talked about, respecting her game and about how they've enjoyed watching her success at NC State. And, but yeah, they kind of just, there were some moments in the beginning where it was like, leaving scores open to take wide open threes, uncontested threes. And then they just, got it together, and it was smooth sailing after that. It was a fun game to watch, but it was not tough to see that they were going to pull through that one pretty easily, which I think, up until that point, after the games in Albany, people were worried that might be a game that knocked them out. But they stayed composed and powered through. So it was a fun game to watch and be a part of.
All right. So certainly Camilla, 10 for 12 from the field, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks. But I want to talk about Ashlyn Swatkins. 20 rebounds off the bench, something that has never been done in the Final Four. Her performance, just unbelievable. 8 points, but 20 rebounds, 2 block shots. Her energy in that game, I really thought propelled South Carolina in the second half.
Yeah, I think several people called her the X factor for the team. And we've seen that all year. Like I was shocked to not see her win Sixth Player of the Year in the SEC, which I understand why Leilani Correa won it. She did a great job, offensively, producing for the Gators and everything. But Ashlyn's just been such a difference maker, and it was cool to watch her throughout the season kind of get more comfortable in her position and as a major contributor on this team, and seeing her become more comfortable using her voice on the court to help her teammates, as Coach Daly said, quarterbacking the defense a lot of the time. And so the stats obviously in that game were glaring, but that's just a testament to, what she was doing all year for this team, and stepping up when Camilla was out and when Chloe was sick and not able to go to the Auburn game, and just really grinding it out and doing what she needed to do for her team to help them be successful. And I know it was especially cool for her and Malaysia to win the national championship with their hometown team, and go to the parade and have their high schools supporting them as well during that. So that's also exciting. I'm excited to see what Ashlyn's able to do next year and what the starting lineup might look like next year, with her and Chloe and all the amazing guards returning, and trying to figure out where to fit Adele and where to fit Joyce, where to fit Maddie, and it's going to be fun.
No doubt. So I thought it was ironic. It turned out to be ironic that Holly Rowe interviews Tessa Johnson's parents on Saturday, and then Sunday, she, on the biggest stage in the biggest game, a career high 19 points. My favorite play in that game is Malaysia Fulwiley with the baseball pass to Tessa, cross court, diagonal, and she just catches it and just lets it fly. She was fearless in that game, a career high 19 points. Unbelievable what she was able to do. 7 for 11. She was 7 for 10. She missed her last shot. 3 for 6 from 3, 2 for 2 from the free throw line. Unbelievable. And so let's talk about what should have been the entire freshman class was Malaysia Fulwiley, Chloe Kitts, Tessa Johnson, Sanaya Jaw, who was suspended. I think she's going now to Arizona. But if the pundits re-ranked that class, there's no way Malaysia Fulwiley is 13th. There's no way Chloe Kitts is, I think, 16th or 19th. And Tessa Johnson was somewhere, I think, around 26 or 29. But Fulwiley, all season long, huge plays, most outstanding player in the SEC tournament, critical in South Carolina's run. Chloe Kitts rebounding off 2 really dreadful performances in Albany, and not much against NC State either, to have a double-double in the national championship game, and then Tessa Johnson to lead the team. And Fulwiley also in that game, 9 points, 4 rebounds, 4 steals, 4 assists in that game. I mean, just another phenomenal job in recruiting by Dawn Staley, and all 3 of those freshmen really came up big. Fulwiley hitting shots big in the national championship game in the first quarter after Iowa races off to a 10-0 lead, and then 20-9 they led, and then after that it was all South Carolina.
Yeah, the one of the big takeaways for me from the national championship game was that without these new Gamecocks, they wouldn't have won this game. So Tessa and Tahina shooting their threes, and them having talked in the preseason and then in the postseason after the national championship game about how they watched the national championship or the Final Four game last year, and they were like, they need somebody like me to be able to do these things. And then for them to be in that game and make that difference, I thought was huge and also pretty poetic. There were a lot of lovely little storylines that got tied up in the end of that game. So that was fun for me as a writer. And Malaysia, yeah, she popped off. I think she scored 7 points in her first 3 minutes on the court, and then also obviously had her amazing assists as she always does. And yeah, Chloe has really grown a lot. I mean, we talked in the preseason and beginning of the season when she got the starting job about shy Chloe or timid Chloe doesn't exist anymore, is what Coach Staley was telling us, that she really has stepped into her own more so confidence wise and being able to back down other players wise and stuff too. So she was a double machine this year. A lot of the players on this team were. So yeah, it was exciting and fun to watch. I mean, for Tessa to have that game, I thought was huge. It's I think the Texas A&M game in the SEC tournament was a big game for her as well. And then you had that one, and then the UNC game, I think, in the tournament as well was a big game for her after getting the start in the Presbyterian game and not being able to do a whole lot. But I think it was just kind of an off day for her. So it's cool to see the freshmen come in and make a difference in the postseason when we talk about how much of a grind and how different the postseason is than the regular season, which I think, again, speaks to how I was talking before, just how unique this team was and how kind of perfectly suited for the moment this team was. Because, when you're a freshman, you're experiencing this for the first time, we're seeing you perform this way, and it seems like you're just a natural at being able to handle these kinds of situations. And that's not something you can teach. It's something you get either by experience or you just have that kind of instinct or mentality. So, yeah, I mean, I voted her personally as my most outstanding player, even though I thought Camilla also deserved it. It was kind of a coin flip thing for me, but I just thought the way that she contributed was so awesome, and it was cool to see the two of them on the all Final Four team as well. But yeah, I'm excited for next year what these players are going to do and what their role is going to be on the team, because the story this past year was that everybody was gone and it was going to be all new people, and now this year only one person is confirmed to be leaving / has left, and that's Camilla. So we'll see how the minutes shake out and how the starting lineup shake out and everything, with all these wonderful players who also all happen to kind of play the same position. So I'm curious to see how Coach Staley navigates that, but she obviously is no stranger to balancing talent and gameplay and everything.
So not only new players, but 2 new coaches as well. Winston Gandy, who Dawn Staley credited with breaking down the scout, and I think they got a good picture on Friday night, the way UConn played Caitlin Clark. Like, for me as a sales rep, when I was getting ready to sell a new product and we'd go to training, I just wanted to know what good looked like, right? Because when you see what good looks like, something that really works, you're not going to necessarily do all of that, but you're going to use what you can and incorporate that into your style. And I thought Winston Gandy, Dawn Staley, and the players got a good look at what good looked like against Caitlin Clark with what Gino Auriemma did and Nika Mule. And obviously it was not a good start for South Carolina with Breezy guarding her. For whatever reason, Breezy could not force her to go right. She allowed her to get into that left-handed dribble step back, which is Clark's signature move. But Raven's revenge tour, we thought it was going to be her making threes, right? Because of Clark waving her off and just turning her head and staying in the paint. It was a putrid day from the field for Raven. The only shot she hit was a layup after she picked Caitlin Clark's pocket on what was probably going to be the last possession of the first half. But her defense, the steals, the block shots, the hounding of Caitlin Clark and forcing her to go right after that epic first quarter in which Clark scored 18 points. The rest of the game, just 5 for 20 and just 2 for 9 from 3. And a lot of that was Raven Johnson. And I thought that's really how she put her stamp on that game, was just really taking Caitlin Clark out of the game offensively for Iowa.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll first speak to the coaching staff. This coaching staff, I don't think gets enough credit for being very smart. Like, everyone talks about the recruiting and everything, and obviously that's a big part of it, because when you have great players, you can do great things, right? But this coaching staff is super smart, and they know basketball. And I know that there are various, like, anonymous polls or whatever that don't have Coach Staley as a top X's and O's coach, but I think that's pretty ludicrous, to be honest.
I've been saying that for years.
Yeah, I mean, even just watching, like, the end of the Tennessee game in the SEC championship, like that, or tournament, like, that's her making adjustments in the game, right? And so I know that she doesn't call timeouts a lot, and she kind of expects her players to kind of just get through some of these slumps and everything. But I don't think that's a testament to her basketball brilliance, right? And so then obviously she's also got more basketball brilliance around her. And she talked about how all the different coaches, I think it was in Albany, how all the different coaches serve a different kind of purpose, and their personalities allow them to connect with the players in a different way. And Winston and Khadijah are, the 2 newcomers. They are younger, and so they have a way about them that they're able to just kind of relate and tap into the player's mindset a little bit more easily. So I know a lot of the players talked about working on their shot with Winston, particularly the guards. And then they talked about Khadijah being that spark plug. And I wrote a little bit about her. I wrote about both of them. I wrote about Winston in the preseason back in August. And wrote about Khadijah during the March Madness run. But they served a perfect niche purpose with this team and in the course of this season's kind of journey. And so it was nice to see Coach Staley kind of give him props for that scout, because I know I'm sure that was a game they started prepping for last April. So, this is something that they were probably anticipating and excited, just like the players, to kind of tap into and see what was going to happen. And Khadijah, it's cool too, because, she was part of the first Final Four team here. And when I and David Cloninger talked to her after the Elite Eight, when they secured their trip to the Final Four, we asked her about her excitement being able to go back. And she was like, yeah, I'm excited, but I also remember how I felt leaving the Final Four in 2015, and I don't want to feel like that again, just like I know these players don't want to feel like they felt last year when they left the Final Four. So for her, when they won, we talked about it being Raven's revenge, but also a little bit of Khadijah's revenge too, because she was able to finally know what it felt like to hoist that trophy up and everything. And then Raven, yeah, I mean, talk about a perfect story. Like, Raven, also brilliant, because labeling this as her revenge tour was so smart. Getting out in front of it as early as September, using this language and stuff, so smart. And then it played in perfectly. And then she came up with the repeat tour thing too. Brilliant. Like, so smart, like marketing wise and storyline wise and everything, like just great stuff. And it's fun talking to her. She talks just like she plays. She's kind of a mile a minute, like super smiley and fun to interact with and everything. And I wrote a little bit about her revenge season a little bit before the national folks did. And it was cool. It was cool getting to talk to her because it was sad to hear that she was so shaken by what happened last year and that she kind of had a crisis of self after that. But it was also cool to hear her talk about and to talk with other people about how the women's basketball community kind of helped lift her up. So I talked with Letitia Ami here about their friendship and everything, and how she was able to kind of help pull her out of her funk and get her to start going to church, and how that helped her a lot, kind of in realizing that things happen for a reason. And, I'm meant to go beyond this and to kind of redeem myself and redeem my team and everything, like everything is by design. And so that helped her. And then also talking with Angel Reese, who is a friend of hers and now a teammate of Camila Cardozo's, which is fun. And how they kind of were able to speak with each other and counsel each other through stuff. But yeah, I mean, ultimately Raven got herself out of that funk, right? And worked hard in the gym and worked toward getting to this revenge opportunity and really capitalized on it. But it's cool to hear that like other young women and other women around the community were the ones that kind of helped her get to that point and kind of helped elevate her in that journey while she was doing all that work behind the scenes. But yeah, her defense, I mean, I feel like Raven's super underrated, and that kind of just happens when you're on a team with so many talented, wonderful players like she is, right? But her steals and assists all season have been like huge stuff, and those aren't necessarily as flashy as like points or shooting percentage or whatever, but she played such an integral role on this team, and her ability to speed things up in conjunction with Tina's ability to kind of calm things down. And yeah, she's been really fun to watch all year, and I'm excited to see what her role looks like next year. I can't imagine it's really going to change all that much, but just seeing another year of experience and what that can do for her, and a whole year of building confidence up and seeing how she's able to tap into that next season.
No doubt. So that story you did on Raven with LA, by the way, major props. One of the many great stories you did all season long, but that one I thought really special insight into, LA having not one but two major knee surgeries really derailed her high school career. She probably would have been the number one player in that class, but she had two consecutive ACL injuries. I just think she's going to be a tremendous pro. And Raven, not only I thought in that game in particular, it was her defense. I don't know how many times Caitlin Clark's had multiple shots blocked in a game, but that was one of them. And I thought one of the big momentum plays in the game was that play right before half when I was holding for the last shot and she got careless with the ball and Raven just picked her pocket and went down to give South Carolina a 3-point lead. And in the second half, all South Carolina extending the lead with Tessa Johnson knocking down threes, pow, Cardoso, as Ryan Rucco said, just inevitable in the post, getting that big offensive rebound when it seemed like two Iowa players were trying to pull her to the ground almost, and she just fought through and got that rebound and the stick back. And so now as we look ahead, I'll say this, right? Like, South Carolina is returning everybody, but I don't really think Malaysia Fulwiley and Tessa Johnson are going to be satisfied with 12 or 14 minutes a game. I think they're coming for minutes and they're coming for playing time. To me, no spot is guaranteed. I know Dawn Staley is committed to the seniority, but there are going to be no holes in this lineup. And, you're bringing in the number 2 rated point guard, but probably the fastest point guard in this class, in Maddie McDaniel. And I think, Peyton, it's safe to say after 3 All-Star games, I don't care what ESPN says, Joyce Edwards is the best player in this class, and probably Kennedy Smith is the second best player in this class who's going to the other USC. 19 points to lead the East squad in the McDonald's All-America game, sharing MVP honors with Sarah Strong. The Nike Hoop Summit game, I think this was only the second time they played a girls game in this, but Team USA versus the world, the best girls players in the world, okay? 25 points, 9 rebounds, 5 steals, 15 points in the second half to lead Team USA, who trailed by 13 at half, trailed by 10 going into the fourth quarter to that win, MVP. And then in the Jordan Brand All-America game, 25 points, 7 rebounds, again, stellar defense, and the MVP for her winning team. Just talk about Joyce Edwards and the show she has put on. I just think she's a basketball player. There's no position for her. I think she can play on the wing, in the high post, in the low post. She's so crafty because she's great with the ball in her hands. She's just so unique and a Swiss Army knife for Dawn Staley and that staff to figure out how to use.
Yeah, definitely. And that was an exciting night when they officially got her to sign it and commit. And it's funny because I remember being there and driving there and prepping and everybody being like, oh, well, she might pick Clemson. She's got orange nails and like, who knows? And then we talked to her afterward and she was like, oh, I just picked orange because it was cute. So that was a funny thing. But yeah, no secret, Joyce is an incredible basketball player. And Coach Staley, she doesn't miss out on incredible local talent. And that's how she's been able to build what she's been able to build here at South Carolina. And one really interesting story too to come out of her recruitment process that I've seen people kind of like misinterpreting and reporting incorrectly is how academically South Carolina attracted her because she talked a lot about, academics being important to her. Super smart student. I think before she committed, her high school coach like a mini speech and said she had a 5.1 GPA, which is wild because I didn't think you could have higher than a 5.0 GPA. Anyway, but both her parents are work in engineering, and she wanted to major in environmental engineering, but South Carolina doesn't have that. So Coach Staley worked with the South Carolina Honors College about finding a way for her to customize her academic scholastic path, right? So she can find a way to take classes and study things within this topic, even if it's not necessarily like a declared major at the University of South Carolina. And in the weeks leading up to Joyce's commitment, Dawn Staley's been wearing like a hat with the South Carolina Honors College, what's the letters on it, right? Acronym. That's the word I was looking for. And I just thought it meant SC head coach, not SC Honors College. But then things are happening and I'm putting the wheels together. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. She's really playing 4D chess with this, right? So, I mean, all of these things, working that hard to get Joyce to come here, right, and offering her when she was in middle school and all this stuff. Dawn Staley's very good, as we know, at recognizing and scouting incredible talent. And Joyce is one of those, right? So it's going to be exciting to see how she fits in next year. I know you talked about seniority being a thing that Coach Staley prioritizes and everything. But yeah, looking at this roster next year, it's hard to figure out where the minutes are going to go, right? And that's the one thing that I can think of being if I'm a recruit, maybe I would not necessarily want to come here just because it's you have to fight with all of these amazingly talented players for minutes. And in covering this team this year and talking with different players about their journey toward the role that they've taken on this team for this past season, a lot of them struggle with that, right? So they come in and they know, because Coach Staley makes it, and her staff, they're very transparent about the fact that you're going to have to wait and you're going to be a small fish in a big pond here, as opposed to being a big fish in a small pond like you're probably used to and you could be at other programs. It's one thing to hear that and to take that and be yeah, I'm willing to sacrifice because I want to do cool things with you. And it's another thing to live through that, because then you have a little bit of a crisis of self. Or I think I was talking with Chloe Kitts about how everybody kind of just goes through a little sad depression period really when you first get here, because you're told that things are going to be this way, but it's a different thing to actually experience it, right? So it takes a special kind of player to be able to navigate that and to keep and maintain their commitment to the sport of basketball, but also to South Carolina, right, and Coach Staley, because it's just really hard and you only have so much time in college. So, I mean, you talking about Tessa and Malaysia not being satisfied with 12 to 14 minutes a game, I mean, that's completely reasonable. But it's also hard because it's well, who do you knock down, and how do you satisfy these players enough to where they take a different kind of opportunity, right? And that wouldn't be them, knocking the program or knocking Coach Taylor or anybody like that. They just got to look out for themselves and in this limited window of opportunity that they have to play college basketball, right? And talking with Malaysia in the locker room at the Final Four, it's interesting because she's aware of the fact that she is in this group of elite freshmen that in this generation of women's basketball that we're talking about, right? Like Juju and Hannah and all these, and Michaela Williams and all these other wonderful players. And she was the only one of those players that was in Cleveland, right? And so that's significant. But she's also aware of the fact that all those other players are starting and she is not. And that's a challenge. And that's been hard for her to navigate and to understand. And even though she really cares about basketball and she really trusts the coaching staff and everybody, it was still hard for her to recognize that and to grapple with that. And, after the performances that she had in the clutch, and her and Tessa also, that's completely reasonable for them to want more, right? But then that's up to the coaching staff to figure out, well, how do we appease the players and put the best five on the floor at a given time? And what does that look like? How do we satisfy people? Is that, by rotating a certain amount or by giving people starting jobs, or do we keep a kind of a fluid starting five going, or do we stick with this same five for the most part like they did this year, and then just kind of like, plug people in and out when if need be, and like what does that look like? So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate it and whether everybody's able to and willing to stay, because like we talked about before, like you're not going to have another freshies, thing most likely like ever again anywhere. And that's just the way that things are. But, we'll see what happens. I'm excited. But as far as like forecasting lineups and stuff, I have no idea. I'm curious as to whether they're going to do like a 4-guard lineup, maybe, because they were playing with that a lot at the end of the season this year with Camilla having varied availability. I wonder if they're going to, go with Ashlyn and Chloe in the starting lineup next year and 3 guards, and would those 3 guards be Raven, Tina, and Bree again, or would they be somebody else, and how do you deal with that? And are they going to try to swap Adele in and have her start games sometimes, because I know it's been a while since she's been able to play a full season and everything? Like, how's her recovery mixed with her not having played college basketball yet going to play into things? Is there a big that South Carolina might want to try to pick up in the portal, or is Sakima Walker maybe going to get a little bit more burn next year? Like, who knows? Like, there's so much stuff up in the air, but there's scholarship spots available, right? So, anything could happen, but it's going to be hard for them to figure out the best way to mesh all of these very gifted basketball players within a 40-minute window.
No doubt. So, just quick going back to Joyce Edwards, I thought there was one thing Coach Staley, because of the preseason media availabilities, every time you heard her talk about the one thing they were missing was that point forward. Like, even though Aaliyah Boston was a 5, she was a point forward. Asia Wilson was a point forward. I thought that was very intentional. That was a message to Joyce Edwards. So for Adele Tack, I have a good friend who got to spend some time with her at one of the meet and greets. She is a legit 6'6". Her injury is not like a torn ACL. Dislocated kneecap in non-contact is usually because there are gaps in your growth plates. She's going to be 100% probably by the end of next month, but she was beginning in January in every team meeting, at every practice, with the team in every game. I think that's invaluable. And Sakima Walker, it does appear, will return, but Adele Tack, when you look at the film, she's special, and Dawn Staley generally does not compare a lot of people to Aaliyah Boston. So it is going to be difficult, but that's a great problem to have. When you have that many players, it makes you so much harder to prepare for, because, just like Kim Mulkey said after the SEC championship game, it was one player, but it was a player off the bench, Malaysia Fulwiley, who just went nuts. So, hey, great stuff. Payton, I probably kept you too long, but I can't thank you enough. We always enjoy seeing you. And I'm going to go ahead and bring on Phil here, because we've got the youngest person in the media covering the Gamecocks and the senior statesman. That's a kind way for putting it when you're really old. And you're wearing basically the same color. How about that? I missed the memo. Of course, there's no orange in my wardrobe. Sorry.
This isn't orange.
It kind of looks orange.
It's reddish.
Red. Okay.
A little reddish.
All right. Well, hey, Payton, before we let you go, tell us what you got coming up next on Go Gamecocks.
Yeah, right now I'm prepping for the very exciting homecoming of Asia Wilson in the Las Vegas Aces preseason game next month. So looking to get some coverage up on that and excited for to go back to CLA for some basketball in May.
All right, so let's pick this bone and corn. So Asia Wilson is, I don't even think it's a question. She's the best player in the world. Okay. She doesn't have her own shoe. Caitlin Clark hadn't done squat in the WNBA, and she's getting a huge deal from Nike. I mean, look, give credit where credit's due. She's put a lot of eyes on the game. They're thinking a lot of people are going to buy that shoe, but should she have a shoe before a 3-time MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year, back-to-back world champion, and Olympic gold medalist? Come on. If Asia can be in the commercial with LeBron for Pringles, she needs a shoe.
Yeah, it's really wild because I don't think anyone's out here trying to say that Caitlin doesn't deserve a shoe, but it's like, why don't these other players deserve a shoe? And that's the problem, right? And you want to talk about marketability. I mean, Asia Wilson is, like you said, the best player in the world. And she's also now a New York Times bestseller. So she can sell things. And y'all, put out your MVP content about her and everything like that and capitalize off her success in that way. I mean, give the woman a shoe. Come on. It's pretty wild to me personally. I feel like you're leaving money on the table. And I can't wrap my brain around it because even looking at the other active players who have signature shoes, right? I don't even want to try to compare like Puma and Adidas, right? Because those are different companies. So whoever they decide to do shoes with, like that's whatever. It's not going to necessarily directly affect Asia because she belongs to a different company. But when you look at the fact that Sabrina Ionescu has a shoe and Asia Wilson doesn't, I mean, I have a pair of the Sabrina ones. I love them. But like, look at what she's done and her popularity and look at what Asia's done and her popularity and tell me that something's not amiss. And then also Caitlin Clark gets her shoe before she plays a professional game. Like, what do those two people have in common that Asia doesn't? Interesting. Wonder why that is. So I don't know. I got to imagine that there's some stuff going on behind the scenes, hopefully. And hopefully what the situation is that Asia is just very like particular about what her shoe is going to look like. And so she wants to work really diligently at getting the product that she wants. And so no one can really say anything about that before it goes up. I'm hoping that's what's happening. But if not, then like, come on, people, what's going on? I also got to think that Dawn Staley, being a lifetime Nike representative athlete, would probably be trying to get people to hurry it up on that end as well because her girl deserves a shoe.
Phil, what are your thoughts?
I really haven't given it much thought, to be honest with you, but I hear the argument, and yeah, it makes sense to me. Everything that you're saying, it makes sense to me. Certainly Asia Wilson is the most dominant player in the game. The shoe thing, I don't know. It took a little while for Michael Jordan to get his shoe, and he was very particular, of course, if you watch the movie, about what went into his shoe. Maybe Peyton's right. Maybe it's some behind-the-scenes stuff going on. But all it takes is a suit in a suite somewhere to make a decision. And somebody along the line there in a position of power, looking at the popularity of Caitlin Clark, looking at the number of tickets being sold in advance by the Indiana team and the opponents of the Indiana team in expectation of her playing in different arenas. They see this. And so somebody up the line there said, let's go ahead and jump on this and make a huge deal and get ahead of the competition when it comes to the shoe for her. All it takes is an executive in a position of power to make that call. Why it hasn't happened with Asia, and I get what Payton is hinting at. I would hope that is not the case, because I would think that Asia Wilson, breaks all color barriers to me, and for what she's accomplished on and off the court. Not to mention her eloquence in speaking, her public persona, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, what shoe company would not want her as a spokesperson for them? What shoe company would not want her to have their brand, on her feet? So, yeah, I mean, that is an excellent question to bring up, why that hasn't happened for her, the best player in the league. I don't know. Marketability, what the numbers tell these executives, the data they look at. And again, all it takes is a person somewhere up the chain of command to make that call.
All right, good stuff. Payton, thanks for joining us. As always, enjoy the rest of your day and your week, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Yeah, thank y'all.
All right. All right. Korn, what's good, my friend? Sounds
What's
like a
good?
What's not good, but what is good is our Boston Celtics epic beatdown of the Heat tonight, game 2. So we got this kind of little Celtics club going with you, me, and my good friend Mike Yuba, who's a good friend of the show.
Mm-hmm.
He is
Well, he's from Boston.
he is a Beantown native and lover of all sports, Boston.
Well, he was born into it. You and I, we had the pleasure of choosing. So,
that's true.
I mean, look, I'm nervous. I have a little formula when it comes to the Celtics. It starts at 16 to 18. Now it's 15 to 18. Of course, last year you counted it down. Year before that, we've been so good for so many years with this group. I do worry. I do worry about the live and die function of our offense with the 3-point shot. When it's there, the Celtics are unbeatable. But when it's not, they're very vulnerable because they don't have a second option, it appears. So I really worry about that. You cannot depend on your 3-point shooting every night to be there. And and the Heat are always a pain in our backside. They're always a pain in our backside. We saw what they did in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Somebody got hot and we couldn't stop him. And, they might get a guy going, it could be Tyler Hero, could be one of the other guys, get somebody going. Martin last year, remember Caleb Martin last year? The guy was Jordan-like.
Unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't matter where he shot it. It was going in. I'll worry about that. But still like our chances. Feeling good anytime that, we win and the Lakers lose. That makes for good NBA playoffs to me. So riding high right now.
No doubt. So to me, I think the difference this year is the unicorn, and that is Kristaps Porzingis. He's the guy because before him, the Celtics were not posting at all. Jason Tatum hopefully has come to realize he's not a great 3-point shooter, but what he can do is what Michael Jordan did to a lesser degree, and that is post up players, get into the mid-range, and take players off the dribble. But when they go screen and roll with Porzingis and they get that switch and they have him at the elbow, or I guess they call it the nail now. I don't know why. But when they get him in that post area against a smaller defender, they really punish opponents. And he's been the real X factor for them. And so that's what I think will be the difference with this team. All right, so before we get to football, let's stick with basketball and let's go to some Gamecock basketball. Huge news last week with Cam Scott asking for and be it granted a full release from his national letter of intent with Texas, immediately choosing to stay home, citing some family health situations. But Korn, now this is 3 years in a row for Lamont Paris. You got G.G. Jackson, right, who had been committed to North Carolina. You get Colin Murray Boyles, who's clearly the top player from South Carolina, even though he played his senior year out in Utah at the prep school. It really prepared him. And now you've got Cam Scott, who is an elite offensive player and pretty good on the defensive end, setting a record for steals in a season with 100 this past year for Lexington. What's the short-term and the long-term impact now of Paris being able to get top guys to be at home and all these guys right there from the Columbia area?
Yeah. And you throw Jordan Butler in there from Greenville. So
right, he's coming back home.
Yeah. So, I look at it two ways. On the one hand, he got beat on all three of those guys, not Murray Boyles, but the other three. Got beat in head-to-head recruiting the first time around with them because each one chose to go somewhere else. Now, I know with GG, he got in there kind of late, and maybe the die was already cast with that one in North Carolina. Cam Scott opted to go to Texas because of back then in August, Rodney Terry had been recruiting him for a long, long time, had a strong relationship. He could have gone to South Carolina right out of the gate, chose not to. And, of course, Jordan Butler visited South Carolina and others, Clemson as well, and opted to go to Missouri. So he got beat on the front end. But in today's world, this is why I think coaches are maybe a little bit more relaxed about recruiting, because they might lose round one, but they have a chance to win round two. And that could be more important than winning round one. And in each of these cases, these three guys fell back into the lap of Lamont Paris, which was his good fortune. Now, GG's presence, while good for GG and his individual numbers, obviously didn't do much for the team. Cam Scott, like you mentioned, looks like a heck of a pickup. And Jordan Butler was the 1A player of the year in the state back in his high school days. And, 7 feet, what can you say? You can't coach height, they say. So you got a big guy who has European skills, stand outside and shoot the three, but I imagine can go inside and do some posting up. So, those are three good breaks for Lamont Paris. That's a boost to your roster, no question about it. He needed to address the inside game. He's done that there. And, of course, still hoping to get another South Carolinian. Who would have thought Nick Pringle would become such a hot commodity? But, guy comes out of a Whale Branch, and he goes to Wofford. Then he goes to a JUCO. Then he goes to Bama. And he really showed out, I thought, in the tournament. I thought
absolutely.
Yeah, I thought he really showed some good stuff. So he's a hot commodity. And they got a shot at him, obviously. And they're not looking at a couple of guards as well. So, look, man, the portal giveth, the portal taketh away. And it's working well for Lamont Paris. Looks like he'll have a very nice roster to work with next season.
It's a lot tougher when you come into a new job, right? Like Lamont Paris had no wins at South Carolina. They get the late flip from GG. Then they win 11 games. Cam Scott's like, man, 11 games. Plus, from some friends here in Austin who are huge UT guys with ties to the athletic department, there was major NIL money involved in that as well. Texas has the largest endowment in the country. So, but now I think after 26 wins, after tied for second place finish in the SEC, making the NCAA tournament in year 2. Lamont Paris, being strategic and resourceful, getting Talon Cooper to come back home, who was fabulous, right? Getting BJ Mack, even though he couldn't. I mean, I'll say it to you, but I put it in terms younger people can understand. Couldn't jump over a shoebox.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was able to contribute because he was crafty and at times could knock down, perimeter shots, but a very crafty offensive player. Also, the development of a guy like Zach Davis, like Josh Gray, who got better, even though he chose to hit the transfer portal. I think that kind of, to me, indicates the writing is on the wall. And if you look at it, Morris Ugasuk, another guy who they anticipated redshirt, he was playing in every game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Colin Murray Boyles, who, when they offered him and took him, Phil, he didn't have a single Power 5 offer. And, I mean, let's face it, if he's healthy all year, he's probably the freshman of the year in the Southeastern Conference. And so a lot of good coaching, a lot of development, a lot of evaluating guys by Lamont Paris. I think moving forward, particularly, they've got Jameer Brickus coming on campus tonight, the guy from LaSalle who they really like, very crafty. More of Michi Johnson than Talon Cooper, but more of a natural playmaker, 5 assists to less than 2 turnovers a game, but a 40% three-point shooter. I mean, if they could really cap it off with Nick Pringle, this team is loaded for next year. I mean, they got good players coming in. They're returning the bulk of their roster. And then the transfers they'd be adding. I think it's a good recipe for success. I mean, certainly Nick Pringle is going to be in high demand, but being a native of South Carolina, I mean, let's face it, Alabama, they shot more threes than anybody in the country. That's not exactly a post player's dream, right? Lamont Paris showed they like to play inside out. Mm-hmm. So I think things are trending the right direction. And, Colin Murray Boyles, I think he's just scratching the surface of his ability.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you summed it up nicely. They should be in a position to build on what they did this season. Sometimes you have that big year. We saw it with Frank Martin. Then personnel turnover, and you don't follow up. It just goes back to where it was. So I think this will be a key third year for Lamont Paris in building his program to, build on what he did. A return to the NCAA tournament would be huge. 26 wins, that's a big number. You don't have to get 26 wins, but you can get back to the NCAA tournament, then, of course, win a game in the NCAA tournament. That would be another huge boost for the program. But, yeah, I think the roster at this point on paper looks very, very good. Also, you consider the fact that Murray Boyles staying healthy for a full off season will add something to his repertoire, not just be a back to the basket post player, add a few things there. Of course, he's already a very good defender and rebounder. I think he'll only enhance that because he'll be stronger next year. You mentioned Ugasuk. I like him as well. He came along faster than they thought that he would. He only stands to get better. And, they've got they got the big kid coming in, Federico. See how advanced he is. So he's going to give them some size inside as well. They, Cooper was, he was the calming agent out there. He was the guy, the glue that kind of held it all together. So You wonder, is a Jacoby Wright, can he kind of fill that role? Because this will be his, fourth year? And he's a guy that's gotten better every year to where he's made himself a valuable player on this team. So who becomes that leader out there? Who sets the offense? Who settles down the offense? Who sets the tempo defensively? Cooper did all that for them. He really was a godsend to that team. So replacing him will not be easy. Michi, obviously explosive, dynamic. You hate to lose a guy like that because he was a guy that probably could have taken it to about 20 a game for you next year. So losing that offensive firepower right there. You think about the outside game that they lose. I mean, B.J. Mack, like you said, wasn't much of a leaper, but he made you come out and play him on the perimeter, and that opened it up in the middle, and that opened things up for Murray Boyles inside or Gray inside. Cooper could hit the three. Of course, Johnson would hit the three. So they do lose some dynamic outside scoring there. So replacing that, I think, will be key for this team continuing to build on what it did this past season.
Yeah, I think that Jameer Brickus, if they add him, he's a 40% coming off the season. He shot 40% from three. There's Korn's flexing.
I don't like any basketball player whose name's got brick in it.
Yeah, well, he's not a bricklayer because he is a 40% three-point shooter. But maybe it's Brickus because he's Philly tough as a brick.
Could be.
And then Cam Scott, and then Ugasuk. And, I really think Wright is more suited in the bench role. And he's shown he can shoot threes. Trent Noah, a guy they've got coming in, driving a lot of Kentucky fans crazy that Cal didn't go after him. He had a huge senior year. And then Federico, I really think he's a stretch four. I mean, he is a guy that can kind of score from all three levels. And so I think it's going to be intriguing. But, man, Cam Scott, what a player. All right. So spring football just wrapped up for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks. Just your general impressions. And Korn, I want to give you a compliment because now with Gene Sapikoff retired, you're the only guy in the room that seems prepared to ask a tough question, even though, Beamer doesn't really like it very much when somebody pushes him on something. Tip of the cap to you for that. But just your overall impressions of what you saw, the media availability with South Carolina football this spring.
Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, from what I saw and then what I've read and what I've looked at, I mean, I'm kind of impressed with where they are coming out of the spring. I mean, I know they got some question marks, but I think Lenore Sellers can be all that. I really do. And I think they're going to adjust the offense to his skills. I mean, they should not run the offense they ran last year with Spencer Rattler. It makes no sense. Rattler was an NFL prototype in the pocket type quarterback. This kid is a guy, just watching him the other night, and that's really all I've seen except for a little bit in high school. I mean, he's a rollout left and right guy who can tuck it and run when necessary. He's big. He's got good speed. He's got smarts. He's got a big arm. I mean, I think you got to take advantage of all those elements with him, and I think that they will. I think the offensive line will be better. It's got to be better with the additions that they've made from the portal and in high school recruiting. I mean, I'm looking for the 3 kids from South Carolina to make immediate contributions in some fashion, and that just makes them, deeper. When you look at the returning offensive line, I mean, Lee is solid at center. Tree is solid at left tackle. Baugh is solid at the right guard. Left guard, right tackle. I guess, competition there. I guess Casey Henry
Casey
probably be the
Henry.
right tackle.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's healthy, he's probably the right tackle. Yeah. So I mean, they're pretty solid up there with veteran guys who played a lot of football, and then the young guys coming in to compete, back them up, give them some depth. So I think that area looks good. I love the running back room. How can you not like this running back room? And I think the addition of Sean Elliott working with the running game with the type of offense that he's good at, which is the mobile quarterback in the running game, I think that all fits. I mean, Rocket Sanders, if healthy, is as good as anybody in the country. You know what Juju can do given an opportunity. Impressed with the transfer from North Texas, Oscar Attaway. I think he's a good running back. I mean, they're pretty loaded there. Tight end position continues to look good. I think Simon could have a huge year for them. Receivers, still, they're probably still looking for that go-to guy. Though there was one play in the spring game, like a little dig route, where Mazeo Bennett made a nice catch across the middle. He's got speed and he's got hands. He's young, but I think he's got a great deal of potential, but probably still shopping for some help at that position in the portal. And then the defense. I mean, this has got the opportunity to be as good a defense, the best defense they've had since the Clowney years, I think. Since Clowney and Devin Taylor and Travian Robertson, that whole crowd there that was so good. Gilmore. I like this. I mean, the additions on this defense, like Demetrius Knight, I think he's going to be huge for them at linebacker. They've added size and depth in the middle. They've added some pass rushers on the outside. And the one corner spot, of course, has been up for grabs, and I guess it's still maybe a bit of a competition. We know the safeties are set. The nickel is set. They just look doggone solid to me on defense. They look really, really good to me there. So I think this is going to be a better team than last year, despite not having a pro quarterback like Rattler. I just think the overall team. Place kicking is, I guess, still a question mark. Punting is not a question mark. They got their punter back. They're good there. But, man, that schedule. I mean, I count at least 8 ranked teams out of the 12 right now. So it is going to be a pretty much a dogfight for them every single night. They're going to have to play at a high level, and they're going to have to be coached extremely well. They're going to have excellent game plans, and they're going to have to execute to beat some of these teams. I mean, to ask a team, anybody, I don't care if you're South Carolina or you're Michigan, to play, at Oklahoma, at Alabama, at Clemson, to have to do that at Kentucky. I mean, that's as tough a road slate. I mean, that's as tough a road slate as you'll find anywhere in the country. So they've got their hands full from a schedule standpoint, but you know what? Nobody accepts excuses. Nobody wants to hear the schedule's too tough. Everybody in the SEC is going to have a tough schedule for the most part. I think South Carolina having to deal with a Clemson is much like Florida having to deal now with an improved Florida State. You step out of your league for your rivalry game and you're playing a top 15 team. So that just makes it that much more difficult for a team like South Carolina. This could be a year where 7 wins would look awfully good. 7 wins would look awfully good. Bowl qualification, go win a bowl game, finish with 8 wins. That might be considered a very, very good campaign. But the question is, how do you get to that next level? I mean, I know they're doing everything they can in recruiting. They got the NIL thing going, but so does everybody else. And I mean, like with Ryan Montgomery, I mean, it must have been Georgia all the time in his mind. South Carolina did everything that they could to get him. But one thing that his father told me prior to the announcement, in the days leading up, one of the criteria that they were looking at, the chance to win a national championship. And when he got that opportunity to go to Georgia, even though Georgia is still recruiting quarterbacks, and they will continue, this kid's not afraid of competition, obviously. He'll go in there and compete, and if he's the best guy, he'll win the job. That's not going to scare him off. But he could walk into South Carolina and probably be the guy for 3 or 4 years. But the chance to play for a national championship, how can South Carolina sell that to the elite players? How do you do that? You can sell them a dream, but Georgia can sell them a reality. Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, obviously, and some others. So that's tough. And you just wonder when South Carolina, with everything that they put into it, with everything they got going on, when are they going to have that breakthrough? Well, they had that breakthrough, I guess you could say, back in 2010. Almost had that breakthrough, and they stayed good for a few years. But now under this regime, when will they have that breakthrough? Because the schedule's not going to get any easier moving forward. And I think they've recruited pretty well on the high school level, and I think they've recruited really well out of the portal. So the pieces, I think, are pretty much in place. Now you just got to go beat some people. That's how you do it. I mean, if you're Beamer, you're saying these are opportunities. Oklahoma, that's an opportunity. Alabama, that's an opportunity, on down the list. But you got to beat them, So it's out there for them. I don't know if they can rise to the occasion and get it done, but it's out there for them.
All right, so let's go back through a little bit of that. So I do think the depth on the offensive line and the talent is going to be much improved because of, like you said, I'm really based on a really great source. I think South Carolina has 2 SEC quality left tackles in Tree Babalade and Josiah Thompson. Thompson by the fall will be 320. And from talking to a source, as good as Tree was last year, they thought he had to played too many reps for a freshman. He kind of wore down. Now you're going to have 2 guys that you can roll out there. I think that's going to be great. But Torricelli Simpkins, I think, is a guy that's going to be tough to keep out of the lineup at guard. I think he and Marquis Anderson will battle for that other guard spot. Kamar Bell, I think he could be a guy that could be your backup center and can play one of the guard spots. And then even I thought Aaron Park at right tackle showed well for a guy who you kind of took a flyer on because he was a good player coming out of high school, but he never really played. And then at running back, and Phil, you're probably the only person I can ask this that can give an answer. And look, South Carolina's had a lot of really good running backs. I'm not shorting anybody. But you want to talk about the greatest of all times. It's not Marcus Lattimore. Okay. He was awesome. It was George Rogers. You go from R for Rogers to R for Rocket Sanders. He's probably the most physically imposing running back South Carolina's had since George Rogers. Very similar size, speed, and power ability there.
I would agree. By the way, looks like they just got a commitment alert by Shane Beamer.
Oh,
he just
the
put
old
one out.
Welcome home is out there.
What do you think?
So we'll get to recruiting in just a minute. So I do agree at wide receiver. I did like what I saw from Mazeo Bennett. I thought Tyshawn Russell flashed a little bit. Not a whole lot of downfield pass plays. Joshua Simon is a stud. I really like Brady Hunt. I think when he enrolls, Michael Smith will certainly be a dude that will play. And then on the defense, like you said, DeAndre Jules, Monkel Goodwine from Alabama inside. Then Dylan Stewart, special. I mean, he really flashed in that spring game, as did Gilbert Edmond, as did Kyle Kennard. You know, Brian Thomas Jr.'s bigger, stronger. Desmond Umeozulu, Elijah Davis. They got a lot of pieces, and Bengali Kamara at linebacker and the two freshmen who are on campus. I mean, they have really increased the size, speed, and athleticism at all the positions in the front six.
I would concur. I like what their defense looks like. I tell you what, think about this. You mentioned Stewart, and, man, he looks really impressive out there in that spring game, getting down that three-point stance. I think with a little more training, he's going to be incredible pass rusher. So Nick Harbor, you know, let's say he goes to Paris and goes to the Olympics, and he's tied up with that into August, and he comes back, you know, for football, and he's in no way in shape to be a wide receiver. But, you know, he was an outstanding defensive end in high school as well. Why don't you just take him and put him out there and say, go get the quarterback, you know? Don't worry about technique. Don't worry about this, that, or the other. Just use your natural God-given talent and your speed and go chase down the quarterback. Can you imagine Harbor lining up on one side and Stewart on the other?
I mean, I've always thought that was his best position, but I think to get him, you probably had to do that. By the way, it looks like, Korn, this welcome home would be for a 2026 prospect, which would be their second. They already have a commitment from quarterback Landon Duckworth. I mean, let's look at that corner spot. I thought Bakari Swain, you know, Judge Collier was out with an injury. Bakari Swain, he flashed under the lights. I mean, he was great in coverage, and then had the, you know, highlight reel left-handed one-hand interception. I thought he was really good.
Agree. You know, he was an excellent athlete coming out of, I think it was Carrollton, Georgia, wide receiver and defensive back. So that's another one you put in the mix there in your secondary. So, again, just to go back to what I said earlier, I think on paper they've got as good a group of defensive players as they've had in a long, long time. I don't see why they won't be very good on defense. I don't see why the defense can't help keep them in games and give this offense a chance to do some things. But the offense has got to be able to run the football. Now, you know, it's each of the 3 years that Beamer has been there, the running game has regressed in terms of average per game. And last year it was down to 85 yards per game. Maybe that had something to do with the change with the running back coach. I don't know. But I know they got to block better. That's one thing. And, of course, I think the talent in the running back room might be a tick up as well with Rocket Sanders, who you mentioned, and Attaway. And let's don't forget the transfer from South Carolina State, Howard. Yeah, so another one to keep an eye on. So, I mean, they're deep, and they've got talent there. So they should be able to run the ball better. And I think the fact that you have a mobile quarterback who's not going to be sacked 41 times, you know, you look at that. They were sacked 41 times, and they gave up, and they only had 21 sacks themselves. So, you know, they've got to address those two numbers specifically. They got to keep the quarterback upright and they got to get to the quarterback better. That alone will make them a more successful football team.
No doubt about it. I mean, the SEC, it is a line of scrimmage league. And I really think a lot of this is going to fall on Sean Elliott. I mean, look, I'm not trying to be overly critical. I'm not throwing Lane Teasley under the bus, but outside of about 3 games, he has been the offensive line coach all 3 of Shane Beamer's years at South Carolina. And I know they like to devote a lot of time to cross-training guys. But I think with what Sean Elliott brings and his title as run game coordinator, I think with Dow Loggins and Sean Elliott, there's going to be a lot of collaboration and some supervision to make sure they get the right guys in the right spots to maximize what they can do in the run game. And we saw it with Sellers, the same kind of things we saw with Connor Shaw. How many times were they in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 10, and Connor Shaw runs out of the pocket and gets past the chains and move the sticks? And the fact that those teams were also really damn good defensively. That was really the formula. Run the ball, move the sticks, hit some plays in the passing game, play good defense, and don't beat yourself. That was the formula for those teams.
Connor Shaw, you could not diminish his importance to that team at all because of his ability to do exactly what you said. And I see kind of the same thing here with Sellers. I think he gives the Gamecocks at quarterback probably their best 1-2 punch in a number of years. A guy that can do both things really well. So you got to take advantage of that, and I'm sure that they know that, and I'm sure that they will. And that will take pressure off that offensive line. His ability to escape, his ability to get out on the corner, his ability to release the ball quicker as well. That will help the offensive line across the board. So I look for improvement in that area. You hate to put a lot on a guy who's only thrown 4 passes in his career. By the way, he's completed all 4, so he's never thrown an incomplete pass in a real game yet. But you hate to put that pressure on him. But he seems like the type who can handle it. He seems very mature and poised and composed for a young guy. So, again, I like this team. I think this team's got a chance to be good. Will it be reflected in the record? Well, they're going to have to go beat better teams along the way, and that remains to be seen.
No doubt about it. So, hey, let's switch up to a little recruiting. So the week before the spring game, really big for South Carolina, and then they land Brian Rowe, 4-star receiver from Concord, DeMarcus Leach, big rangy safety that they had in camp last summer from Abbeville, which, as we all know, is football town, USA. They get Anthony Addison, a guy who I really like, from Sumter. Then the day of the spring game, they get probably the highest rated cornerback they've gotten in the Beamer era in Shamari Earls. And then on Sunday, Caleb Williams, a big defensive lineman. You get Earls from Chester, Virginia. Caleb Williams from Chesterfield, Virginia. There is an outstanding welcome home that we thought would announce on Sunday, but you never know, with these kids wanting to get their edits and their videos and everything. And looks like they're trending in the right direction with some other really big-time prospects, including a couple of guys that you've spoken to recently. Tight end Hayden Bradley from Buford. He's supposed to announce his top 5 today and then announce his commitment on Saturday. Irmo quarterback / athlete AJ Brand. What did you gather from those interviews, Phil?
Well, like you said, Bradley is going to be doing something here. He said about 250, 255. So I'm actually taking a look now to see if there's anything there yet, and he hasn't posted anything yet. I would suspect South Carolina would be in it. I'd be a little concerned that they only got one visit out of him, and that came at the very end. Though they've been recruiting him for a while, this was his first time getting on campus for the spring game, but he was very impressed. So assuming they make this cut, and of course with an announcement coming up Saturday, I mean, kind of leads you to believe he's already got his mind made up. So I don't know. I'd say the fact that he got to South Carolina so late, but he already had his plans on cutting his list and making an announcement. I kind of wonder about that from their standpoint. But he said all the right things and all the good things about him the other night. You know, Brand is obviously very interested in South Carolina. They are not recruiting him as a straight quarterback. You know, they're recruiting him as an athlete. Most everybody else is recruiting him as a quarterback. He's not going to hold that against South Carolina because he feels like he can get on the field and play a number of different positions and be a success. So that shouldn't be a big factor for them. The fact that they missed Ryan Montgomery, I thought maybe they might go back to Brand and say, okay, look, you know, we want to change our positioning with you to quarterback and da-da-da-da, but that hasn't happened. So maybe they have some other 25 quarterbacks in mind that they're going to go for. Though I tell you, Brand, you look at his numbers playing, you know, for a big high school, you look at his numbers passing and running, and you see a guy who's a two-pronged threat who comes from a football family. His dad, of course, is his head coach, so you know he's well-versed. You could probably do a lot worse at quarterback than him. But right now, South Carolina still sees him more as an athlete. Talking to him some about quarterback, but also he talks to the receivers coach, and he talks to the secondary coach. So could end up at any of those if he goes to South Carolina. But Virginia Tech likes him as a quarterback, and he's going to visit there at some point in time, and other schools like him as a quarterback. So we'll have to see what happens. But I think South Carolina is very much in the mix with him at this point.
All right, so I'm just kind of thinking outside the box here. Could this 2026, isn't there a wide receiver in Irmo?
Yeah.
Is that Irmo or?
It's Irmo. Mm-hmm. Murphy is his last name.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Well, I mean, look, you just never know. It could be an offensive lineman from Virginia, for all I know.
The gray kid?
Yeah, I mean, they're in on so many players. So, they call this guy the Oracle. Okay, Steve Wiltfong, formerly of 24/7 Sports, is now taking his talents to On3.
Yeah.
They don't have a crystal ball. They have a recruiting projection or prediction machine. They call it the RPM. He's issued picks for South Carolina with Jared Smith, who I got to say is just as highly thought of in some of the major rankings as Dylan Stewart. I mean, top 18, top 26, number 52 overall player. But Korn, he's from Hoover, Alabama, 6'6", 235 pounds. He's been down multiple times now. And then you've got the big offensive tackle from Gaffney, Shedrick Surratt. Been a long time since there's been a Shedrick at South Carolina. That was a guy that I went to school with, Shed Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in a class with him, and he told the professor, call me Shedrick. I mean, your thoughts on these guys?
By the way, just to correct the name, it's Murph. Donovan Murph is the wide receiver, not Murphy. I might have said Murphy. We might have said Murphy. Donovan Murph is the guy from Irmo.
But he's not a Smurf, which rhymes with Murph.
That's right. He's a big kid. He's 6'3", 180. Good size. I don't know. The question now, Surratt's in the 25 class, so they're very in good shape with him at this point. I imagine they're going to get him based on what he's been saying and his involvement with them. Follow the visits. He's been there a number of times. The Smith thing, that surprises me. I mean, they've put themselves in fantastic shape with a guy who's a high quality player coming out of the state of Alabama that you would think Alabama Auburn would be all over. To pull one out of Hoover like that would be impressive if this were to happen. Is he Hoover or is he Alabaster? Thompson. I think he's Thompson High School in Alabaster, isn't he?
Thompson High School in Hoover. Yeah.
Well, it's in Alabaster. That's the town.
Yeah, it is in Alabama.
I like to say Alabaster because I can say, you are an Alabaster. That would be a heck of a get if that comes through. Because he has all the looks of a big time player. That's the same school where Clemson got Peter Woods. That's his high school, and that high school puts out a ton of talent every year.
No doubt about it. So it also appears the Gamecocks are really making a move here. And I always say I like to follow the visits. So Zayden Walker, 5-star linebacker, Slay County, Georgia, but he is the brother of South Carolina signee Jalewis Solomon. He made like his 12th visit over the weekend, and it appears the Gamecocks made a big move there.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Follow the visits. That's always a good way to have a feel for what a guy might be thinking, and the natural connections there with his brother. Looks like a big time player. That would be a terrific pickup out of the state of Georgia. They've recruited that area, that school in the past, and had success. So that would be another huge pickup for the class if they're able to reel him in.
No doubt about it. So big things are happening. Phil, great stuff. I can't thank you enough for being on. But it's time to wrap it up. So tell us what you got coming up on Sports Talk tonight.
Sports Talk tonight. What is it, Wednesday? Hoping to have Mark Kingston on with us at 7:05. Talk about the season to date and looking ahead to the home stretch with 4 tough series to finish out SEC play. These weekends coming up will make or break the regular season for the Gamecocks and determine if they're going to be hosting a regional, et cetera, et cetera. So 4 big weekends ahead for them. Hopefully he'll be able to join us at 7:05. I'm waiting on confirmation. I'm going to start hitting up some of the other schools around the state as well from a football standpoint. Hoping to have Coach Todd Knight from Newberry with us tonight. Again, waiting on confirmation there. And that will pretty much do it. We'll update the news, recruiting, phone calls, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Phil. Well, I can't thank you enough. As always good to catch up with you. And
hey, before we sign off, the 5 from Hayden Bradley. Florida, Michigan, Ole Miss, Penn State, Gamecocks.
All right, so I guess we shall see. But the Gamecocks slide in the list. We'll see what happens on Saturday. Phil, it's always a pleasure. Game 2, Celtics Heat. I'm sure we'll be texting.
Mm-hmm. Let's get her done.
Get it done. All right, Phil. Take care. We'll catch up with you down the road.
See you, Mal.
All right, so that is going to be a wrap. Also tonight coming up is the Garnet and Black Town Hall, 7 o'clock Eastern for our VIP members. If you love Gamecock Pod Live, you will love Gamecock Pod Daily. You can check us out on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/ Gamecock Pod Daily. It's never too late to sign up. Join us tonight on the Garnet and Black Town Hall. It's a live interactive Zoom call that lasts about an hour. Then we go to an unrecorded overtime period. That's where the real scoop is dropped. I'm looking forward to hanging out with a bunch of my favorite Gamecocks and friends later on tonight. So give it a try. You can sign up. You get a week free trial. Sign up for an annual VIP membership. Get up to 3 months free. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right. So for Payton Titus and Phil Kornblutt, this is Keith Alsep saying, God bless. Go Gamecocks, and I'll see a lot of my good friends tonight. We'll be talking Gamecocks on the Garnet and Black Town Hall. So until next week, this has been Gamecock Pod Live for April the 24th, 2024. I think in Bethune this weekend, it'll be the chicken strut. All right. Until next week, I'm out of here.